I joked, "Move in with me." During a storm next day she asked, "Was that a joke or an offer?" The night the storm came, I thought it was just another miserable evening in a long chain of lonely ones. Rain slammed against my windows like someone desperately trying to get inside. Thunder shook the walls of my small apartment, and the city outside looked like it had been swallowed by darkness. I remember standing by the window with a cup of cold coffee, staring at the flashing lightning in the distance, wondering how life had quietly turned into something so empty. Then my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. But before we step into this story, if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes one simple moment can rewrite an entire future. Her name was Lena, and she lived in the apartment across the hallway. We had been neighbors for almost a year, but we were the kind of neighbors who only exchanged quick smiles in the corridor or short conversations while waiting for the elevator. She had a quiet presence, the kind of person who seemed strong but carried something heavy behind her eyes. That stormy night, as the wind howled outside and the lights flickered in my apartment, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Lena was standing there soaked from the rain, her hair damp and clinging to her face, holding a small flashlight because the hallway lights had gone out. She looked embarrassed, almost apologetic, as if she hated asking for help. She explained that the power in her apartment had completely failed and the storm had short-circuited something in her fuse box. Her place was cold and dark, and she just wanted somewhere warm to sit until the storm calmed down. I stepped aside without hesitation and told her she could stay as long as she needed. The wind outside roared like a restless ocean while we sat in my living room with only a small lamp and the sound of rain filling the silence between us. At first, our conversation was awkward. Two neighbors who barely knew each other suddenly sharing a small space while the world outside felt like it was falling apart. But slowly, the tension melted. We talked about small things at first: work, the building we lived in, how terrible the landlord was at fixing things. Eventually, the conversation drifted into deeper places, the kind of places people usually avoid. She told me she had moved to the city to escape a painful past, though she didn't go into details. I admitted that my own life had been drifting without direction since my father passed away 2 years earlier. The storm outside seemed to mirror something inside both of us, like two lonely people accidentally finding shelter in the same place. At some point, the thunder cracked so loudly that the windows rattled, and Lena laughed nervously. I tried to lighten the mood and jokingly said that if the storm got any worse, she might as well move in with me so she wouldn't have to deal with her broken apartment again. We both laughed. To me, it was just a passing joke meant to break the tension. But sometimes life hides its most important moments inside the smallest words. The storm lasted for hours. By midnight, the rain softened into a quiet drizzle, and the city slowly returned to life as lights flickered back on across the neighborhood. Lena thanked me for letting her stay and returned to her apartment once the electricity came back. When the door closed behind her, the silence in my living room returned. I cleaned the cups we had used for tea, sat back on the couch, and thought about how strange it felt that the apartment seemed emptier now than it had before she came over. For the first time in a long while, I had enjoyed someone's company. I fell asleep that night thinking it had simply been a random moment between two neighbors during a storm. I had no idea that the next day would turn that moment into something far bigger. The following afternoon, as sunlight replaced the storm clouds, I was heading out to grab groceries when I saw Lena waiting near the stairwell. She looked serious, almost nervous, like someone preparing to ask a difficult question. When our eyes met, she walked over slowly and asked something that caught me completely off guard. She reminded me about what I had said the night before during the storm, that she could move in with me, and asked if it had been a joke or an actual offer. For a second, I couldn't even respond. My mind replayed the moment from the night before, the casual tone I had used, the laughter that followed. I realized that while those words had meant nothing to me at the time, they clearly meant something very different to her. She explained quietly that her lease was ending soon and she had been struggling financially after losing hours at her job. The idea of finding a new place in the city terrified her. When she heard my comment during the storm, even though it sounded like a joke, a small part of her had wondered if it might actually be a lifeline. That moment forced me to confront something inside myself. My life had been quiet, predictable, and lonely. Letting someone move into my apartment was not a small decision. It meant changing the fragile routine I had built to survive my own grief and isolation. But as I looked at Lena standing there, trying to hide how vulnerable she felt, I remembered the way she had laughed during the thunder and how the apartment had felt warmer when she was there. I told her honestly that I had meant it as a joke at first. I watched disappointment flicker in her eyes for a split second, but then I added that maybe it didn't have to stay a joke. If she really needed a place, and if she was comfortable sharing the apartment, we could try it. The relief on her face was immediate and genuine, the kind of relief that tells you someone had been carrying a heavy burden alone. The following weeks were awkward, chaotic, and unexpectedly beautiful. Sharing a space with someone after years of living alone felt strange at first. There were little adjustments, figuring out schedules, dividing chores, learning each other's habits, but gradually